Hi, and welcome back to The Conservative Historian. What I'd like to talk today about is World War II and an indirect result of that war, something that really isn't talked about much in U.S. history. Now, World War II, in the annals of mankind, in the history of military action, is relatively unique in that there was actually a moral element that's missing from, well, pretty much every other war fought. Most wars are fought for national interests or the interest of individual rulers or whatever have you. In the case of World War II, the destruction of the Nazi regime out of Germany and the destruction of the Japanese Empire, a very militaristic empire that brought a great deal of oppression to neighboring countries such as Korea and the northeastern parts of China, was something. The destruction of those empires was important. So World War II was a little bit different because there was actually that good war, that moralistic element to it. But it sowed the seeds of something that we are dealing with up until today, a mindset within the United States around the concept of progressivism. Now, to understand exactly what my point is, we have to go back before World War II to 1932. So in 1932, FDR is elected president with a mandate to try to address the issues wrought by the Great Depression. FDR, who was, if you will, a good student of Woodrow Wilson and a cousin to TR, the first two progressive presidents, really wanted to take that progressive concept and implement it. In other words, use the United States government in ways that it had never been used before. Under the New Deal, agriculture, energy, industrial planning, even the money supply were all governed by a federal bureaucracy. In other words, FDR took the visions of Wilson and implemented them and made them real. So what were the results of this New Deal? What was the results of this great encroachment of government on American society, something that had not been seen in the first 150 years of the history of the Republic? In 5 years, from 1932 all the way to 1937 and even into 1938, the United States actually went into a depression within a depression. And as 1938 rolled around, it became increasingly obvious that the New Deal was not working, that the New Deal was not pulling the United States out of the Great Depression. What did pull it out? As World War II began, it began on September 1st, 1939, with the Germany's invasion of Poland, Russia coming in from the other side. As that war began, more and more the American economy started to move towards it, even though we didn't officially join the war until the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, a full 2 years after World War II began. Our economy, with things like the Lend-Lease program to the British and the gearing up of our own military forces, began to solve the unemployment issue, the industrial policies, all of it, well before we were even in the war. And then once the war began, in and of itself, our economy actually prospered. Think about it this way, and this has to be absolutely clear. The New Deal did not pull the United States out of the Great Depression. World War II did. Let me repeat that, because I think that's a myth within American history. The New Deal did not solve the Great Depression. That was World War II. So that's number one, is that Roosevelt's first issue was solved as far as what was to happen. But in a normal election year without the overhang of World War II, in 1940, Roosevelt would have had to face a choice. In the history of the Republic, no president had run for that unprecedented consecutive third term. Now, Teddy Roosevelt did run for a third term. It was not consecutive. So Roosevelt decides to do this. Now, normally the American people might reject that, and normally they might look at the New Deal and say, it didn't work. Your programs didn't work. It's time to start with somebody else. And Might have been Wendell Willkie for all we had known. But the other part of it is that because World War II had already begun in Europe, and because of further encroachments by the Japanese in the Pacific, that in 1940 the Americans had to make a choice. Did they want to change presidents in the midst of all of this foreign issues? And Americans traditionally have shown a proclivity to not want to replace presidents in the middle of wars. They didn't replace Madison, they didn't replace Lincoln, they were not anxious to replace McKinley in the Spanish-American War. Even though that war had fundamentally ended by 1900, they still didn't want to change that role. And even though we weren't in World War I at that point, they didn't change Wilson either. So two things happened. One, the economy started to improve, and because of the concerns of World War II, in 1940, Roosevelt gets reelected, becomes a wartime president, puts all of the seeds in place to win World War II, picked excellent generals, strong admirals, made a number of positive decisions. But what he didn't do, what his policies did not do, was pull us out of the Great Depression. So what does that mean about here today? Had Roosevelt run in 1940 and the New Deal had been on the ballot, and had he lost, it might have put paid to the concept that every time we have an economic crisis, the answer is simple: more government intervention. We had economic crises before the Great Depression, and a lot of times that marketplace would work itself out. In fact, every single time, including in the Depression in 1893, that could be conceivably worse than the Great Depression, the market worked it out without further government encroachment within the lives and the economies of the United States. So though World War II was a good war, there was a moral reason to fight it: the takedown of the Nazi regimes, the elimination of the Japanese Empire. It did sow the seeds in the future of the concept that progressivism and greater government are an answer to any economic calamity. And therefore, the World War II in and of itself was very successful. It sowed the seeds for serious issues that we are going to have to face today in 2019 and going forward. Thank you for listening.